Hey guys, welcome back. So we already set up our Azure accounts. Now we want to actually deploy. So before I do that though, I want to make a slight configuration change to where our log files will be going because in Azure there's no C drive, there's no local drive. So what I'm going to do is let Serialog create a folder within the whole folder structure for the project, and that's where the logs will be written. So that way, when we go to Azure, we don't have to worry about any file path or get too fancy. So let's go over and publish. Now, that being said, I'm just doing this locally for simplicity. There are tons of more, what should I say, robust logging mechanisms that we can take advantage of. I'm just doing this because I want to find the most cost effective way because the other ones cost money as you add on. All right. So let's just right click, go to publish, and we're going to set up a new publish profile. So I already have a published profile for local deployment, which is a folder profile, right? So I can actually just rename this one so I know exactly what it's for. IIS profile, save, all right? But then I want a new one, and this one is going to be the Azure profile. So what I want to do is deploy to an Azure app service. Now, if you don't know that much about Azure and cloud, what happens is that you can deploy an application as on an application as a service kind of constraint, meaning you don't have to worry about the server or anything. They'll just prep like a nice container for you and put your code there, and then they will host it, and that's how you get like a SaaS, right? Or rather, that would be the service is platform as a service. So they're providing the platform as a service for you to just put your app on it and it will just run. So that's what they mean by the app service. And then whether you want it backed by Windows or by Linux, we'll use Windows. Um, Otherwise, you can do it to a container or to a container registry or to a virtual machine. So basically the same kind of considerations that would have made with the IIS deployment to either your machine or a network machine, you would have to take those kind of considerations against a VM in Azure because it's the same thing. It's just a virtual machine, same server. Anyhow, we'll choose the platform as a service, the app service, and then click next. And then this will now, it may prompt you to get connected, so you'll have to sign in, but I'm already signed in, so it just loads for me. It shows you the subscription, resource group, and I don't have any of those. So I'm just going to go ahead and press this plus sign to start building out an app service. They ask for the name. I'm not going to change the name. And then I have a few resource groups here from past projects, but I'm going to create a brand new one. I'm going to call it Hotel Listing API. So that's the name of that resource group. And then the hosting plan here, I can leave it on the default, but then they do have a free hosting plan. And based on where I am in the world, East US 2 is my best bet, and I'll choose free. So you might be somewhere else in the world, you choose the region that's closest to you, but based on where I am, East US 2 is my region of choice, and I'll choose the free deployment, click OK, and then create. And then after that process is done, we can go ahead and click next, and then we can refresh. No, apologies, this is management. So I don't want any management. I'll just skip this step, and then we click So the next screen is showing us what our site URL is going to be. So whatever the app name is that we set there, that's .azurewebsites.net. Because it's free, they give us a subdomain. And we can always go ahead and buy our own domain if we want, but we won't get that far ahead. But because we do have a service dependency on a database, they're saying, well, you need to configure your database for connectivity purposes, right? So I need to go and say configure, and then they'll ask us, do we want an on-premises SQL server database or will it be Azure SQL? So once again, we'll go with the PaaS option where they are just giving us a service in the cloud and we just need to connect. So we have to go ahead and create a brand new instance of a database service, hosting name, hotel service, DB6. See, kind of filled out some things. I'm going to put it in the same resource group as the hotel listing API. There we go. And then database server, I have to create a new one. So it will kind of fill out some things, but I'm going to have to put in my administrative details. And the password part of it is relatively strict. So just make sure you have a special character and a capital letter and a number, and you should be fine once you exceed 7 characters. So once you put in all of those details, you can go ahead and click OK. It will autofill what it needs to fill, but then it does need to, one, create the database server, and then you would have access to connect to it. Right, and that is completed. So let's just go click next, and then what it will do is say, okay, this is the database connection string name. What is the username? So we have to put back the username that we just used to create the database stuff, and the password, and then it will keep it in the Azure app settings section. And we can choose the key vault, but I'll just leave that as the default settings there. And then if we want, we can actually view the connection string value. So I can actually show you guys that. So the data source, this is the connection to the actual database in Azure, right? So if I just copy that, just for my own purposes, it shows the initial catalog. That's the database name. The user ID will be Trevor at that whatever at that domain, and the password, I use a simple password. Of course, in a real life setting, you'd use a more secure password. So then we can just go ahead and click next, and we don't have to touch anything here, and just say finish. All right, and now we can click publish, and this might take a while because it has to create a few resources, and this is saying you are publishing the application without bundling the runtime, checking the runtime compatibility. So we can give that the end result of that check, however, is it launching the browser and sending me this 500 error. All right, so at least we know that it is responding. So the API is there, but we still have a few things that we need to do. So let's start off by going to our portal. So when we just click manage in Azure portal, we get navigated to this page showing us, well, the application running in Azure. All right, so we know it's definitely not a dud. It's there. We click browse. It's going to show us the URL protected by HTTPS, and we're getting by that 500. So we're not any better off than we were before, but at least we can confirm a few things. Now, if we go down to configuration, it will kind of show us some of the things like our connection string. All right, so remember that connection string and that hidden value. At least from this connection string, I can see the server for the database. So I'm just going to copy that. Remember I showed you earlier, so I'm just going to copy that, and then in the management studio, I'm going to try and connect to it. So I'm just going to click that plug. If you already had it open, that's fine. If not, then you launch the management studio, and then you put in the server name and whatever credentials were there and click connect, and it will just prompt you to sign in. So what happens is that the firewall is saying I'm not allowing access to the database from any other source that's outside of Azure. So right now what I'm going to do is just sign in, and then it will add an exception for the IP address that I am using. So that's an important security feature. So I will be behind this IP address. Somebody from their own home with a different IP address won't be able to get to the database unless they sign in and verify, just like I'm doing now. So I'll just go ahead and click OK. Of course, there are ways to allow access from everywhere, but we don't need to do that right now. And then when I look in the list of databases, we see our database. So I'm just confirming that our database is, but look at this, there are no tables. And what I'm going to do is edit the profile and go to settings. And we actually skipped this step. I guess we were too eager, right? So we did not do the migration step. So apply this migration on publish. And well, we already used the connection string with the new hosted database at runtime. So that's not really necessary to tick again, but that's fine. And I'll save and then I'll just click publish again. And if we just look at the log, you see adding database, and then you see here it gives us some indication of some scripting happening. So let's double check. And what happens this time around is that because we said apply the migrations, it actually went ahead and filled all the tables for us. All right, so that's the real important part of this. So we didn't have to manually do script. But once again, it would be prudent of you in a real production live scenario to control this process a bit more than we can do on our personal projects and in our personal time. All right, so you can check out my other course on deploying and controlling production in the environments. But for this, we just want to get our API up and running and understand how all the systems work together. So this is our database currently functioning on our Azure server. So let's go back to our debug console inside of Kudu, go to site, www.root, and then remember that we said put the log files at the same root as the file system. So that's why we have access to our logs folder right here, which will show us our log since we've been doing this deployment. So if I just go ahead and download it, will open it up in a new browser session. And I just want to see why it threw the most recent error. So it says something went wrong with an argument null exception, some string reference error, and some encoding that is supposed to be happening in service extensions line 46. So if we just go and look at the code and see what exactly is happening at that line, it is where we're configuring our JWT, and you see that we're doing all of this, and this is where it says the encoding failed. And it failed because we're looking for key, and key is really an environment variable called key. So remember that we just had to set that up in IIS. We have to do the same thing in Azure. All right, so what I'm going to do is go back to our management dashboard, go down to configuration, and then from here I can say new application settings. So I'm going to say new application setting is key along with the value. So I mean, I can continue to use that same value. I'm going to probably just use a simpler value, but then for consistency between the environments, you probably want the same thing. So it's, you know, one or the other. Either use a simple one in dev, but you use a complicated one in production, or you use one per environment. So even if for, you know, security and separation of roles situations, a developer might not be able to just go into production and manipulate anything because he probably doesn't know. But for simplicity, I'm just going to keep the same key across, and I'll click OK. Go ahead and save that. Continue, and it will say it will restart the application. That's fine. Go ahead and restart. And once that is restarted, I'm going to go to overview, go to browse. All right. So we know that we can't browse anywhere. We're getting this. So at least we're not getting a 500. This is the same error that we got if you went through the IIS deployment. That's what we got when we went to the root. So if I say /swagger, then it will lead me to the Swagger doc being hosted on our Azure website. Then I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick test. So I'm going to try to get the countries, execute, and then I have successfully retrieved all of the countries currently in the database. So that means if I try to use Postman, I'm just going to copy this URL, go over to Postman, and I'm just going to create a new workspace because, you know, sometimes you can overcrowd one. So I'm just going to create a new workspace, call it Azure. And then what I'm going to do over here is just do all my Azure related requests, right? So country, I want to get, there's no authorization tag, but then as you can see, you can get all the countries right off the bat through this. Let's try one of those registration attempts and then to do something that is secure. So I'm just going to be flipping between the original workspace where I had the requests already and this new one. So I'll just go over to the post. I'll just copy this. And instead of boring you with creating it, I just did it So the new endpoint would be whatever the website name is slash and then API. So that's why I didn't remove it since the IS deployment. I left it because it makes more sense here, right? Slash account slash login, and then we can send. And I got an error because I had the login payload instead of the register payload. So I apologize. So we're doing our register and we have the correct payload with the email password. And this is the same one that we tested with from when we were on our local. So I just want to verify that everything still works as it worked local. And we get our 202 accepted. So that's good. We're on the right track. So what I can do is repeat the login request. So I just click that, bring back the login request, and then we can send, get our token. Excellent. And then what we'll do is attempt the delete or creation or something that we know we had set one of those authorized flags. And of course, I'm not boring you with forming the link, but you know that you have to form the link properly. The endpoint is API slash hotel with the ID. It's the delete method. And then we add our authorization, bearer token, and the token that we just got back from the login. And then when we click, we retrieve our 204 no content response. So if I go to the database just to verify, once again, our Azure database, we can verify that we no longer have hotel with the ID 3. So we know that we can register a user to our now publicly deployed API. So if I made this link any more, any easier to remember, then you could actually browse to it. Granted, by the time you're doing this lesson, this probably no longer exists. But the point is that this is how you can publish your API to the world. And using Swagger, you made it easy for anybody to be able to come by and say, oh, that is how this endpoint works, and these are all of those. And you see that we retained our country V2 for, when we're talking about versioning our APIs. We retained the weather forecast default API, but of course, now we can clean up all of those things. And some cleanups that I would suggest would be like with country and hotel. Really and truly, I should have called the endpoints countries and hotels. So the controllers really should have been countries controller and hotels controller, but that's semantics. That's just a matter of presentation. At this point, we can confirm that our functionality is up and running.